Chapter 12. Blaine. Blaine steeled himself for the onslaught of memories as he pulled up to the cabin. Though he still wasn't sure God would forgive him, he had been spending some time the last few days praying for the ability to get beyond his past. The blow-up at Shelby had been a setback, but he was hopeful he would get through today without anything triggering him. He turned off the engine and walked up the quiet path to the cabin. It was too bad it held such terrible memories for him, because it really was a great space. A space to relax and unwind. Southlake wasn't a huge city, but it was still a city, with noise and traffic and too many people. Sometimes Blaine just wanted to get away. He unlocked the front door and forced his feet over the threshold. When he'd been younger, he'd dreamed of the day the cabin would be his, when he could bring his wife and family here, but that had been before the accident. Now, just getting it sold and hoping some other family would find happiness here was enough for him. Blaine shut the door behind him, and in the quiet he could almost hear the sound of two boys running through the small floor plan. "We don't run in the cabin," their mother would say. And the echo of those words lingered in the air. But the boys would race up the stairs to the loft and grab their comic books and flashlights, or badger their parents to take them down to the lake. Those were always the best days, when their parents would take time off and let them swim in the lake. The lake. The thought of it sent a shudder down his spine. He would not think about the lake now. Kenzie would be here soon, and he needed to make sure he was in the right frame of mind to interact with her. As if summoned by his thoughts, he heard the sound of a car pulling up to the cabin. He took a deep breath, pulled back his shoulders, and forced the unhappy memories from his mind. "Sorry I'm late," she said as she stepped out of her car. "Traffic was a bear leaving Southlake. You'd think there was a game going on or something." Her lips pulled into a small smile at her slight joke. She looked different today, more relaxed. Her dark hair was pulled back into a ponytail, and her skirt had been traded in for a pair of comfy-looking jeans. A short-sleeved top was tied at the top of her jeans, displaying the tiniest line of skin, and his heart started in his chest. He liked her even more this way. Images of her wearing one of his jerseys and sitting in his box seat flashed through his mind, and he could see her fitting in with the other players' wives and girlfriends. "No worries," he said, pushing that thought away. This was only their third date. He was a long way from proposals and wedding bells. "I just got here myself. Shall we get to work?" She glanced around before shooting him a questioning look. "Where do you want to put everything? Just out here in the open?" "Put everything?" And then it hit him. "I should have gotten a storage unit or something, right?" Her lips mashed together, but he could tell she was holding back a smile. "Yeah, a storage container would have helped, but I brought some sanding supplies. We can start with the cabinets, and I'll see if I can get a storage unit out ASAP." She leaned back into the car and removed a box before shutting the door with her hip and continuing up the path. "I also have a plumber coming later to help remove the oven and the fridge, but I figured you and I could handle removing the cabinet doors and sanding and painting them. You don't mind getting a little dirty, do you?" He laughed as he thought of how filthy he got in every game. He couldn't remember the last time a shower he'd taken after a game hadn't run brown for the first few minutes. Until you've been tackled to the muddy ground by a 300-pound linebacker, I don't think you even understand the meaning of dirty. Her lips pulled into a wry smile as she eased past him and into the living room. "Touché, but I might be able to top that with cleaning vomit from the bathroom floor without a mop." His face wrinkled in disgust. "Yuck. What did you clean it with?" Kenzie rolled her eyes and laughed as she set the box down on the couch. "With a rag that I had to rinse in the sink repeatedly. It's a long story. But things have a tendency to get misplaced at the center if the kids get their hands on them. Let me tell you, that was not the day to lose the mop." "Okay, yours might be grosser than mine." He couldn't believe they were actually comparing who had gotten dirtier. Kenzie was definitely different from any woman he'd gone out with lately. "We'll see who takes the prize this afternoon." She held a screwdriver out to him and lifted her left eyebrow. "You know how to use this, right?" He chuckled and nodded as he took it. Their fingertips brushed slightly, and he looked down at the heat burning up his hand. He was in so much trouble if just touching her fingertips did this to him. Kinsey made a quick call on her phone for a storage unit, then grabbed a screwdriver from the box for herself before heading into the kitchen. He wouldn't have pegged her for being good with tools, but she kept up with his pace as they unscrewed all the cabinet doors and laid them on the table. Half an hour later, his shoulders burned, but the adrenaline of hard work pumped through him. He enjoyed using his muscles, feeling them stretch and constrict. It was probably one reason he enjoyed football. It was a physical sport, and he was always exhausted when the game ended. "Need a break?" Kinsey teased as he collapsed into one of the kitchen chairs. The grueling work had caused a few strands of her hair to escape the ponytail's hold, and sweat now glued them to her forehead. But somehow it worked on her. He wondered if she had any idea how beautiful she was with her messed-up hair and bright eyes. "I'm fine," he said, answering her question. "Just a little thirsty." "Allow me," she said, grabbing 2 cups out of the now open cupboard and filling them with water. She handed one to him and took a long swig of hers. When it was empty, she set it on the counter and turned to him. "Ready to sand?" He wasn't sure he was, but there was no way he was going to let her best him. "Bring it on," he said, setting his own cup down and picking up one of the doors. She walked into the living room and returned with a sander in each hand. "Pick your poison." The sanders looked exactly the same to him, but he took a second longer just to make sure before grabbing the one in her left hand. "Let's do this." "Outside, though," Kinsey said with a laugh. "I know we plan to redo the floors, but there's no reason to dirty it all up before then." Blaine glanced out the back door. "Outside? You mean on the porch?" He'd been doing so well, ignoring the memories and pretending they didn't bother him. But could he really sit on the porch, that close to the lake, without his past overtaking him? "Unless that's a problem." She raised an eyebrow at him as she waited for his answer. He swallowed the lump that was threatening to choke off his air and pulled his shoulders back. He could do this. If he didn't look at the lake, if he sat with his back to it, then surely he could do this. "No, it's fine." Kinsey tried to keep her focus on the task at hand, but Blaine and his muscular arms kept dragging her attention away from her door. He looked at home sanding doors, but then he had said he had some carpentry skills, so she shouldn't be surprised. Really, she was just glad to see him smiling. The last time they'd been at this cabin, he'd been different, sullen, like an invisible weight lay around his shoulders. But today he seemed lighter. He had still hesitated about going outside, and he was sitting with his back to the lake. But it was an improvement from last time, and she was definitely enjoying the banter they were trading back and forth. "Done," he said, laying his last door down. He looked at her stack, still 3 to go, and shook his head. "I thought you said you were good at this." Some noise that was a cross between a snicker and a snort escaped her mouth. "I never said that. I just asked if you were ready." Ugh, why couldn't she scoff like a normal person? He chuckled, probably at her, and leaned back in his chair. "I suppose I should have made sure you were ready then. Shall I help you out?" "If you want." She could finish her doors without a problem, but allowing him to help her would give her the opportunity to watch him a little longer. "Well, I can't just sit here and watch you work. That hardly seems fair." He leaned across and grabbed the next door off her stack. "I don't know if I ever asked you, and I know this is only your second job, but have you always been into design?" Kinsey pursed her lips as she thought. "I guess in a way. I remember always wanting to change my room around. It drove my mother nuts. I would move my bed from one side of the room to the other." She chuckled at the memory of her frazzled mother banging her toe against something in Kinsey's room that hadn't been in that spot the day before. She finally said I was only able to rearrange the furniture once a month and paint once a year. It was high school when I got into fashion. I suppose the two kind of work together, but it's not what I originally went to college for." "No?" His eyebrow lifted on his head, but his focus remained on the door he was sanding. "No, I thought I wanted to be an actress, and then a lawyer, and then a journalist." Kinsey couldn't believe how flighty she had been. "After a few years, I decided I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I should probably stop wasting my parents' money. So I worked with Shelby for a while. Decorating for the Christmas party was my first gig, I guess you could say, though I didn't get paid for it. Still, I think I knew then that was where my passion lay." "It's good to find your passion," he said with a nod. "It certainly makes a job seem less like work." "Do you think carpentry is your passion? I mean, when you retire from football?" She knew he still had a few good years left, but few football players were still playing in their mid-30s, and even fewer quarterbacks. Shoulder injuries or concussions from all the hits tended to put them into retirement sooner. His sanding paused for a moment as if he was contemplating her question. His jaw tightened and his shoulders rose with a deep breath. Then the sanding resumed. "I don't know." He'd paused for so long she'd begun to wonder if he was going to answer the question, and she certainly hadn't expected what he had said. He seemed like someone who knew what he was doing with his life, but this, apparently, was one area he hadn't figured out completely. Nor did he appear to want to talk more about it. She wondered if it had anything to do with whatever had happened in his past. "Well, I'm sure whatever you decide to do, you'll be great at it. I haven't seen you be bad at anything yet." She looked over to see him flash a half smile, but before either of them could say more, the sound of a large truck pulling up to the cabin carried on the air. "Ooh, I think our storage container might be here."